So let's get started. If I could ask Paul, first of all, Paul, are there any common technical skill gaps that you identify in a young person's ability to achieve excellence?
Common technical skills gaps would be, there's kind of a link with, there's a bit of a dissociation between the qualifications and industry at the minute, I feel, here in the UK. Our delivery is slightly different in that, we're very focused upon the qualifications and completing the qualifications as a mandatory route, but I think that there's other aspects. So it's taken a wee while at times for the awarding bodies to kind of link in with the industry on an ongoing basis, and that there's creating some kind of technical skills gap. So for example, we've very much moved into large format tiles. Some of the tiles we use could be 1200 mil by 1200 mil, and that's currently not something that's very front and foremost in industry. So the current delivery model hasn't kind of caught up with what we're doing in industry, so that there will be a very much a technical skill gap that we have. So it's not really a massive focus, and I think the qualification delivery really needs to remain on target and up to date as we progress and in line with industry and what industry needs and government targets.
Could you give us Patricia's response to that?
Yeah. So Patricia focused on some of the more softer skills, such as critical thinking, i.e. the capacity to identify and analyze problems in order to develop and execute solutions based on the context and the facts. Others would be adaptability, communication, problem solving, time management, perseverance, and motivation to work under pressure. Paul, you obviously, I'm sure you would agree with that as well. Why are these softer skills so important to you?
Well, that's something that I'm personally very aware of, is that those soft skills, they're very much aligned with everything that an employer wants, and industry requires. So those soft skills are personal attributes. So it's simple things like timekeeping, planning, being able to work under pressure, being able to work within a team, being able to work on your own, problem solve. These are all key areas for young trained vocational skills experts and trainees. And in order to be a successful trainee, that's exactly the type of attributes that are required. And then also on top with some of the skills, specific hand skills. If you've got all of those, you've got the full package, then you're going to have a good, successful career. You're going to be very employable. Wall and floor tiling, it's a finished trade. So you can't be kind of good at it, and you can't really, go into somebody's house and then hope it's going to be nice. It has to be a finished product and it has to look well. So one of the things that I've been talking to my students about would be that if the work doesn't look right, this simply isn't right, So, but we also have to have a good technical knowledge as well, and a technical base about the skill area as well. So it's not just fitting large format tiles. We also have to know about the load bearing capacity of the walls. We have to have, because we're putting on large heavy weights onto a wall, you couldn't put it onto a sheet of plasterboard because the tiles are going to fall off and there's going to be installation failure. If you use the incorrect adhesives, the industry today has changed so much from whenever I started. And we are trying to catch up all of the time, but it is always evolving. And it's one of the key areas that I feel that we need to address is how do we remain current and how do we remain in line with industry? And that's our delivery models, I think, we really have to have a look at.
Yeah, Paul, what you've described there and what Patricia mentioned are skill attributes that we've known for a long time are required, such as problem solving and communication and timekeeping and motivation. But what you're describing here is a different skill set to get to that higher level. How do you close that skills gap? What techniques do you use?
Make it very clear. So it's dealing with the learners on an individual basis. So you identify their learning needs, and then you identify what's the best way for them to be able to visualize the type of person or the type of trainee that they must be, because sometimes they're coming from a very, very different background. So we've got guys coming from a background where they're kind of spoon fed, this is the manual, this is the information that you need, you must go and learn this, we're going to give you a quick exam and then that's it, off you go. But whereas when we're moving into kind of like a vocational skill area, you really have to have such a range of soft skills, as Patricia has said. And all of those attributes are first and foremost. Whenever somebody's going to be employed, there's what the employer is looking for is those attributes. So we'll have to identify how they're going to learn it, give them a good, clear picture of how they can achieve it, and that can be individual. So we use a generic, obviously a generic. I've got 16 in my classes, we use a generic approach, but it's really, really honing down into some of the really good skills that individuals have, and then developing a training plan that's going to suit those guys.
Chris, could you give us Patricia's answer?
Yep, sure. So the skills gap can be closed by including additional integrity into the vocational education training system, which means training that develops skills for work and life, strengthening the technical and key skills in young people. This often means going above and beyond the curriculum.
That actually brings us quite nicely into the next question, that I have that ability and that need to go beyond the curriculum. Paul, can I ask you, do you feel that at the moment, certainly in the UK, that there are gaps, significant gaps in the TVET system compared to what it is industry actually requires?
Yeah, there really is. So I think that what's happening is that there's a lot of stakeholders that are working really, really well within their own remit, but what we're not doing is linking together just as well as we could. So in my experience, in my role, I get to look at other vocational educational systems in different countries and stuff. And what I've noticed is the difference between the UK and the likes of Denmark, for example, or Switzerland, is that industry really is a key driver, and they're very, very much involved within the TVET system. So everything is remaining current. Now, some of the countries would be quite full on about their approach to within industry, and I think that would possibly be a step too far for us currently. But there is small things that we can do within our own education system that will make a huge difference, I think. And it's getting those links with industry and tying them into our educational delivery. So we have, for example, in the likes of Switzerland, we have a university model whereby you would have a vocational education centre, but it's also got halls of residence, and they would have them in there and they would train them flat out, and then they would have industry experts coming in, and then they would assess them on a regular basis. So they would have industry. These aren't lecturers. These are guys that are out doing this, Monday to Friday. And what we could do, so that it's somewhere where I think that the UK should be at some stage, hopefully, where we can get that prestige associated with our skill areas again. But it's in moving to that, there will have to take small steps. So I think that in looking at possibly getting some more industry input into possibly endpoint assessment, and not lecturers on the endpoint assessment, but actual full-on consequences for not reaching certain standards. For example, in Denmark, if you don't reach a certain standard, you're being held back for 3 to 6 months because you haven't passed that specific test. And that test isn't assessed by the assessor, it's assessed by an industry professional. And that guy, he's looking at it just so that he knows what the criteria is, what it has to look like, what the details of the drawing are, whatever has to be done. And these guys are coming in and they're assessing that kind of work. So it's having that's just an example of a link that we could have a wee bit better. And they're very much involved with their trade associations as well. So having the trade associations, vocational colleges, industry experts, all working together, I think would be the key. And everybody's doing a great job individually, but if we start and make stronger links, I think that's going to be the key to us really moving forward.
And do you think that would improve the frameworks that we're working towards, having industry involved? Because we'd heard in some other events that sometimes when industry gets involved, the frameworks become fragmented, and actually we have more frameworks to suit different parts of industry, and we don't get the whole holistic approach. Are you finding that within your area of the curriculum, or do you think this would actually be a benefit?
Well, I think that awarding bodies aren't reviewing quickly enough, so I've only really, I've been in further education for 15 years, but I've really only had contact with one awarding body once, and they asked me the questions. Really, ours as construction and the built environment is ever changing. It's very, very fluid. Trends are changing, materials are changing. For us, tile systems are changing. What people want from the fitter are changing. So there's a bit of diversification going on. There's a lot more wet rooms. There's larger tiles being used. There's we have imitation wood in herringbone is massive now at the minute. These are all design things that are being incorporated, but we're still working off quite old, designs and quite old information, and it's not updated. Whereas the trade association, they're all updated with all the current regulations. And then you have the industry experts who have all the exact information, and they know what's going on. They're on the ground and they're delivering it. They're having to diversify. They're already qualified 20 years ago, but they're still now using their skills to diversify and use what they know and be able to change. And those are the things that we need to be able to implement and incorporate into our training. And it does mean at times we may need to go over and above what's being delivered, but we need to be aware of that, and we need to kind of be collectively talking about it and moving forward.
Can I just ask you a supplementary then before we come to Patricia's answer? So is it the case then that in your experience, the TVET frameworks that you're using are actually lesser than the World Skills frameworks? Are you finding there's a gap there from what's been taught around the world in the area that you're in? Because that framework is refreshed and updated every 2 years. That's one of the reasons that we're so keen in trying to get these international frameworks embedded across the UK. Do you think there's a big gap there?
There is. I've been an advocate of change at World Skills level. So it is, you've got all of these experts and they're all getting together. So it's the perfect opportunity to talk about the gaps and the changes that are happening. It is reviewed every 2 years. It could be reviewed slightly more, but this is a great opportunity for everybody who's doing different things in order to standardize an approach and an agreed approach. And in Abu Dhabi, I felt that we needed to make some changes. And I was an advocate of it, as was some of the other experts. And I was very open and honest about what I thought about, for example, the test project and how it could be changed to, more reflect what our trade area is currently doing. So this was talked about, and amendments were then talked about and made in Abu Dhabi, and then they were implemented in the Kazan cycle. So we had different changes being made and implemented in the Kazan cycle then.
Good. Christopher, could you give us Patricia's response?
Yeah, so Patricia touches on something that Paul mentioned at the start there, just around how other countries work hand in hand. So TVET in Colombia works hand in hand with industry. It participates in the description of the competencies that are part of the vocational training program, therefore enabling a well-rounded and appropriate qualification for students. If we look at the World Occupational Standards for wall and floor, it goes further than any current qualification, as it incorporates more advanced technical and key skills that can be applied and are evaluated in skills competitions, which in turn corresponds to producing higher quality tilers who are ready for industry.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, and that's a really good answer, because it encapsulates a lot of what we're advocating here, through using those World Skills Standards to raise the level of provision within your own vocational framework. Okay, so we could maybe move on now around industry to start to think around industry. Paul, in your opinion, what would you say are the top 3 skills that an employer would be looking for in the roles that you're working within today?
Well, this is only my personal opinion, but generally I've been looking at, there's very important ones. First one's timekeeping. Then we've got planning. Being able to plan your day and plan your work is huge. And then problem solving. So those would be the top 3, and not necessarily in that order. But for me, those are the top 3. Problem solving. Every tradesman and every vocational expert is basically just a problem solver. You're not going in and you're not completing the same project twice. So you need to be able to think on your feet. You need to be able to think under pressure, because you've been given the responsibility of completing this project from start to finish in the way that the client wants it. So for industry, we have to be problem solvers. We have to be able to roll with it. We have to be able to use different techniques, different equipment in order to get the outcome that's required. So timekeeping, planning, and problem solving would be my three key ones there. And those are attributes that lend themselves very, very much so to some of the world skills standards and some of the stuff that we would be talking about at these at the meetings we have at the end of each of the competitions.
Thanks. It is amazing that I mean, I was an FE for 30 years, and timekeeping 30 years ago was something that we were always, you know, getting on to students to be better at. And I'm pretty sure in 30 years' time, Paul will still be talking about the need
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But it is so important, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, I definitely feel it's massive. Like, you know, I've got one of my relatives is constantly late, and they're stealing my time all the time. You know, so I'm just waiting. I feel like I'm waiting on them all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, time is money as well, isn't it? You know, when
you're often saying to your kids, you know, watch how you spend your time, and it is currency, you're spending it.
Yeah. Okay. Christopher, could you give us Patricia's?
Yeah, so it's very, very similar. A student should have the willingness to learn, motivation, and work ethic, the understanding of the environment, whether it's corporate market needs, kind of products or services and trends, and the work ethics based in social values. The soft skills are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the next obvious question is, if we have this group of students who are working to a particular standard, what techniques do you now use to get them up from competence to excellence? That's what we're really trying to understand now.
Competence to excellence is through a whole review and reflection process. So it's in any kind of delivery, I make sure, so in a training environment, what I can do and what I'm, which is great that I'm able to do, is I've identified materials that I can use, which allows us, even as a finished trade, to make mistakes. So we can make mistakes within the college. So in order to move from competence to excellence, we allow them to make the mistakes. We allow them, and the consequences of what can happen when things go wrong. Then we can review that, then we can redo it, which is one of the benefits of what we can do. So we're using our reusable adhesive. We're using a very cheap tile, which means we can use quite a lot of the tiles. And to get from competence and being competent to excellence, they really, really have to understand that there are key areas for them to work on skills, and it's individual. So it's not just one generic approach, it's individual. That, you know, they have areas whereby they're not cutting something, you know, cleanly, and they don't recognize that this is being cut cleanly, or there's no surface alignment where there's some of the tiles are coming in and out. And these are all some of the key criteria to some of the competition stuff that we do as well. But it all links so well in with industry. Industry is the exact same thing. As a finished trade, we have to have it has to be right. If it's not right, it's just simply not right, and that's it. And to go from competence to excellence, you really must be able to review your work, and I'm constantly lifelong learning, constantly be improving, but have that ability to review and have a look at the work that you're completing.
Paul, could I ask, just in terms of actually, you know, competitions, obviously, you know, you're heavily involved in both the national and international cycles. How has the competition element helped your students develop?
Well, I make the link. It's simple. I make the link. It's easy for me because I'm very much a big believer in visualization. So if you can give them you can tell them what attributes that they need, you can explain to them why they need them. You know, what's the link between industry and competition. So you have to have these soft skills. So you have to be able to turn up at the competition on time. You have to be able to complete it on time. You have to be able to plan your work. These are the exact same types of things that you can do, that you have to do with an employer. You have to turn up on time. You have to plan all your work. You have to be able to cut very accurately. You know, and these are all just key areas. And the soft skills linked with the hand skills so much. It's unbelievable. You know, and that's one of the main things that I found, is that I can see over and over and over again, no matter where I go, the key fundamental things are always the same. Have a look and work your way through all of these different attributes, improve in these areas, learn from what you've done, and make it better the next time. So that's what I've learned. So it's fundamentals, and giving them a clear visualization of where they are, where they should be.
Can I ask you a supplementary to that just now? So So if you go through that process with your students, and obviously your students are working with employers as well, do you get employers who specifically come to you for students because they are working to the World Skills Standard, and those employers want to invest in that additional processes, techniques, everything that you're using to get them up to that standard? Is that something employers have identified and actually are seeking?
Yes, well, I go out on site assessments, so I'm in regular contact with we're doing NVQ assessments, so I'd have to go out and view them for national vocational qualifications. I have to view them on site only, it's site-based evidence only. So I am in regular contact with them. What I've done over the last 15, 16 years is slowly but surely built a good employer base and a good link with my employers. And that's one of the things that comes back again, is they know that what my background is. They know that I left school at 16, I came out, I'm a tailor, I've served my time for 10, 12 years on site. I'm now in there and I want good, competent men coming out of my college. I'm conscientious. They know the kind of tailor that we have. They know that we strive for excellence. So we started off with a very, very small number, and it was a mixture of FE, fee paying students, that guys that want to change their career, and then you'd maybe have a few guys that picked up the qualification. We are now so heavily oversubscribed that we have not got the room for an extra full class of wall and floor tailors per year. So we have went from struggling to get a class together 15 years ago. Now we have employers that are fully engaged, and we don't have room for the amount of apprentices that are applying to come and do our course. And it's not because of competitions. It is also because of competitions is integral to that there, but they know then that we are very, very much focused towards making our apprentices, whenever they finish, they are very competent and they come out with a good qualification, a good quality qualification that we have delivered over and above. So we try to link industry as best as possible within our college.
Great. Chris, could you give us Patricia's answer? Chris, you're still on mute.
Sorry, yeah. So we didn't get a response from Patricia on that one because we'd adapted the question. So we can move on to the next question, Martin. You're on mute now.
It's all becoming. I need to develop some other skills to help me through this. Multitasking, yeah. One of the things we spoke about was the World Skills International Standards and how they're updated and refreshed every 2 years. And I was fortunate enough to be in Kazan, as you were, Paul, and see your student, Mark Scott, gain a Medallion of Excellence, and from Glasgow as well, which was fantastic, I have to say. But at that event, and in that biannual cycle, there is that opportunity to update and refresh. Are you aware of anything that's coming through the pipeline that's actually quite exciting and innovative and will improve the frameworks that perhaps we'll see in the Leon cycle, for example?
Yeah, so I've already touched upon it slightly there, which was, as I said, I was an advocate for a lot of change and was very vocal about it at the meetings in Abu Dhabi, and then a lot of stuff was it's a step-by-step process. We couldn't really do what I wanted to do immediately. We had to kind of integrate ourselves into it, and then we made some small changes into Kazan where it was there was changes implemented into the test project which more reflected what we had done. So for the test project and specifically for Kazan, it was implemented then that we were going to build steps. We were going to screed in a floor that previously we hadn't done, and we were going to include drainage. And this was all moving more towards, because a lot of people aren't doing the old traditional bathrooms and stuff anymore. What they want is entire rooms that are kind of wet rooms and much more accessible. And you've got old people can access it, much more accessible. Visually, they look fantastic. So there's something that we wanted to incorporate into the test project. But one of the other things that I thought was important is we moved towards blind projects, and there's what the next project is going to be. So Shanghai is going to be completely blind, whereby we don't get to see the project or practice it beforehand. I found that Some countries possibly would look at the test project and do quite a lot of work on one specific project. And as I talked about earlier, you know, a good tradesman has to be a good problem solver. And for you to be a proper tradesman, you need to be able to go into any kind of situation, be able to read any drawing, make any kind of a plan, implement that plan. Hopefully it all works out. If you've had enough training and you're kind of confident in some of the skills that you've developed, you should be able to complete that project blind. So that's something that's exciting. It's a wee bit scary as well, but it's exciting for me because it's something that a proper tradesman should be able to do. And I found that particularly more of the European countries did quite well in Kazan. If I look at the medal tables, the more European countries did a wee bit better. And I think that's because they were using more guys that were much more involved on the tiling qualifications and delivery, instead of, you know, possibly some guys with a few different skills, or coming from university, or just didn't have those hand skills, or just practiced one drawing. We've now got a blind project where you really have to be a very, very good tradesman in order to complete it.
Yeah, Christopher, could you give us Patricia's answer to that?
Yep, so we also introduced the quality section in 2017, where learners must be able to apply critical thinking, meaning to identify problems, analyze information, make decisions and evaluate solutions. This section will continue for the competition in Shanghai. And yeah, and as Paul just mentioned also, an important change was introduced about the publication of the test project. Until the last competition, this was circulated on the website months prior to the competition. Now for Shanghai, the test project will be presented 3 days before the competition. That will challenge the technical capacity and key skills of the competitors.
Okay, thanks. Does any of the delegates have any questions at all just now, either through the chat or any raised hands? No, don't see anything. Paul, can I ask you about the international pressure test that you recently had with Russia?
Yeah.
Could you maybe just tell us a bit about that, how it went and how important it was for your squad members to participate?
Yeah, so we recently had virtual international pressure test, as everyone knows, alongside Russia. We hadn't been training together for quite a while, but some of the work that I do in order to build up to getting ready for competitions, and it's the same kind of work that I do when I'm in the college, is that you break down the work into manageable loads. So you break it down into small pieces. And what happened at the virtual international pressure test was it was nearly our first opportunity for us to get together and then start to bring together all the training that we had previously done. As we do in the college, we start and give them small skills, small hand skills, and then start and give them, you know, slowly but surely they're kind of learning without even realizing it. And then we're bringing it all together in the culmination of maybe a bit of a test project or a phase test. If it was in the college, it would be a phase test. And if it's in a competition cycle, it would be like, for example, this virtual international pressure test. So yeah, that's what we done. We had Stanislav Mosev, who's the deputy chief expert for the upcoming Euroskills, in participation with two of his competitors. I think he also had another couple of guys. They've got a couple of guys in the pipeline as well there. So I'd be surprised if I don't see some of them again quite soon.
And see, in previous years, have you actually had to go abroad to get these pressure tests, or have you worked locally in the UK across, you know, the different nations? How far have you travelled?
I'm very lucky. I get to go all around the UK and with a different hat on. So as the lead judge for CITB UK and Skill Build, and I get to see different vocational educational colleges within Scotland, Wales, England, and Northern Ireland. And there is differences there, as Chris had already been explaining to Patricia. There is differences within all of the United Kingdom. But I've also travelled to Switzerland, and I've also travelled to Denmark quite a lot. So we kind of work in partnership with each other to go over, and we will do the exact same thing. So it was exactly the same as the virtual international pressure test, but it was a face-to-face, and it was a great experience for both myself and for my competitors to go over and meet with the different experts, the different trainers, have a look at the vocational education systems. We had Switzerland, they won gold, and I've looked at how well they have done over the last 10 years or so, and they're up with gold medals for a lot of it. So they're very, very competent and very, very friendly, very, very open and honest about their training. And it was a pleasure to train alongside both of those countries. So I was very lucky to get. I was in Herning, a little farming village below Aalborg in Denmark, and then we went to Zurich, just about an hour outside Zurich in Switzerland. And I took loads of photographs, but there wasn't one photograph that I took did the beauty of Switzerland any kind of justice. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and then I was looking at the photograph going, nah, there's no point.
So moving forward then with these international pressure tests, do you think, the virtual ones are here to stay, or do you think we need to move to a hybrid model, or would you much prefer just to go back to traveling abroad and actually getting the face-to-face competition?
I definitely would be an advocate of virtual international pressure tests. It gives us an opportunity to get a lot of the work done, and start and put ourselves into a kind of a competition kind of mode, train of thought. Because really, over lockdown, and we've been in this pandemic, and we've had a squad for such a long time, you can really start, and the competitors can really start to think themselves, well, am I actually going to go anywhere with this? What am I doing it for? Is there going to be a competition? But this really started to bring it home, and the reason that I like the virtual international pressure testing is because it was so easy to set up. Now, there was a lot of planning went into it initially, but now that we've done it, it's kind of set like a blueprint on how you could easily replicate it. And I've got the equipment, I've got the, I kind of know that you have to have a good Wi-Fi connection, because we're dropping out on and off at times during the first one. Maybe a hard line that would mean that you're getting a great connection, and you can start and really, really link up with people much more than you would have been previously. But I also think there's a lot of value in going for other people to come to us to see how we do things, but us going to them physically, and the one-to-one kind of interaction that you would get.
Well, that's great. So does anybody have any other points that they'd like to make, any contributions or whatever, because we're now starting to get to near the end of the event here. Chris, is there anything you want to add?
No, I don't think any from my side, other than Paul. Obviously, you've got a female squad member for I believe the first time. How are we seeing more female tilers come through the system?
Believe it or not, that's a good question, because we are, and because I'm in good contact with my international counterparts, they're also noticing the same thing as well. So they are. So I noticed that for one of the first times ever as well in Denmark. Denmark really recently had a training camp, and it's one that I would usually attend with my squad, and they had some female competitors also. So they do like a national finals and international kind of pressure test within themselves, and they invite everybody to come over and over to Herning. And I've noticed that there was a few females as well, which is great. And my competitor, her sister is a plasterer, and she's very, very much towards breaking down the barriers and the traditional construction idea that it's a male only kind of construction skill, but it's not at all. And she's really doing a fantastic job in showing other young women out there that construction can be for them, and that we're here to help them as best as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big takeaways for me from Kazan was that in the painting and decorating competition, 2 of the top 3 in the world were females.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how in our country in particular, the stereotypical image of construction workers is just so all wrong in the UK,
Yeah, this is hopefully the kind of work that we're doing is going to break down those barriers. We're also going to look and give our vocational education a bit more prestige. It's very, very well regarded in different countries as much as the academic route, and I think that there really is a mindset that we have to change, And WorldSkills UK is going to be working very hard towards changing those mindsets, I think.
Absolutely. Patricia, can I thank you for being part of our event today and the contribution that you've made? It's been really insightful. Thank you for that. Paul, as always, it's good to hear from you. And again, your enthusiasm and your drive and energy to get our young people to that very highest level is just fantastic. And thanks to all of you for coming on today. And hopefully we'll see you all in person sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.